Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the February meeting of the Board of Early Education Care. We're pleased to be here today in Framingham at the Metro West YMCA and Early Learning Center. I want to thank Rick McPherson and his team for opening their doors to us today and welcome both he and Heidi Osgood-Kaufman to offer some welcoming remarks. Thank you for having us today.
All right. Can folks hear me okay? This is good?
Yeah.
Well, when Heidi asked me to come and do a welcome, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. You are all here in full force, and it's just wonderful to see you all, and it's our pleasure, really, it's our pleasure to be hosting today and have you all here today. I'm a little biased, but I do hear often that communities around the state and around the country often consider the YMCA really the heart of the community in a lot of ways. And at the Y, we consider the early education centers that we run in those programs to be the heart of our Ys in a lot of ways as well. The work is very important to us, and our partnership with all of you, I can't really tell you just how much it means to us and how much we appreciate our work collectively together and just the impact we have on the kids and families and communities in Metro West, but throughout Massachusetts. It's truly incredible. This work is really important to us. I just came from a meeting where we're in the process of creating a new early learning center in the town of Ashland. And it's going to be similar to the beautiful center we have here. We're going to take everything we've learned there, apply it to the new early learning center that will serve about the same number of kids, 100 or so. And Heidi has been right, with us every step of the way, looking at every detail of this center to make it just perfect. So we're excited about that. The last time we had a chance to host something, we, thanks to the Children's Investment Fund, we were able to put a new playground in, and I hope you got to see it today, at least peek around the corner. I can't tell you what an impact that has had. I remember thinking how expensive a playground like that is and how much work it is to pull that off. But at the end result, the joy that the kids are having out there and, just how much that's brought to this center, can't really say enough. That said, I'm done talking. I'm going to turn it over to Heidi, but it's such a pleasure to be here and to be with all of you this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you. So as Rick sort of alluded to, at the Y, we're committed to strengthening our community, and we believe that it's our role to provide high-quality programs and services to help support children and families that are designed to meet their needs and to expand their opportunities. We also believe that we're stronger when we work together, and as I sort of look around the room and see so many of our community partners, as well as the partners with EEC and even others at the through DESE and whatnot, we just really would like to take this opportunity, or I would like to take the opportunity to really express our gratitude and appreciation with EEC as one of our biggest collaborators and supporters. And just to highlight a couple of the things, and I'm sure I forgot some of them, but we would not be able to do this without EEC's support. We have 10 licensed early learning and out-of-school time programs, and our fabulous licensor is sitting in the back over there, who is truly a star. We serve about 450 kids a day, which translates to about 550 kids total. We offer a significant amount of financial aid through the income-eligible contract, and we're very excited to have received the new priority population contract to serve school-age children who are homeless. Wish that wasn't a need, but now we can do that better. We also have a coordinated family and community engagement grant, where we regularly engage about 160 individuals from about 90 different families in Ashland, Holliston, and Hopkinton. And I shouldn't forget Natick in there too. We have CPPI funds that are used with combined funding from Framingham Public Schools and funding from the Metro West Y to serve 2 classrooms of pre-K children, 4-year-olds, at no cost. And in Framingham, we have made the priority of kids who are attending the program who have had no formal early education experience before they come to us. So we are working very hard to get them ready for kindergarten. Beyond the services that EEC enables us to provide for the children and families, it also supports our staff. The C3 funds specifically have been absolutely critical in raising the salaries of our educators. We've also been able to move a couple positions from part-time to full-time. We've been able to pay for additional educators and have more people in our classrooms and in our after-school sites, as well as behavioral health support. And I definitely was talking with the commissioner earlier. The Career Pathways, Mass Reconnect, and the apprenticeship programs, and all of those have been amazing in helping our educators and our staff move from, no, I don't think I want to go to higher ed, to taking a class here, taking a class there, participating in the program. And we have at least one person graduating from Fitchburg State in a couple of months using the scholarship that she has received. So been amazing in improving their own professional growth, but also the quality of programming that we're able to provide. Beyond that, we also work with DESE sort of directly or indirectly to provide meals to kids in our programs. And we have our own kitchen on site here where we're serving thousands of meals a day. And we have some farm to table grants and things like that that we're able to bring some nutrition education into our licensed programs. And we've been able to use some braided funding through multiple different sources, such as using ASOS funding to enhance our behavioral health services by making a position that was half-time inclusion support and half-time CFCE playgroup facilitator. So who knew that that was such a great match, but it actually turns out to be quite a strong one. So we could not do any of that without this all of the partnerships and the work and the support. We also know, of course, that the work that we do is not easy. It's not simple. It is quite challenging, and there's no shortage of work that needs to be done. I was on the 9:30 call yesterday morning, Amy O'Leary's and the Strategies for Children call, and heard the secretary speak. And I will paraphrase our agreement that high quality, affordable, and accessible early education and care that serves the whole child is critical, while also supporting the educators, staff, and families, regardless of anybody's circumstances. So we're in this together.
Yes. Thank you, Heidi. And Heidi gave many of us a tour of the facility where we got to spend some time with some of the kids and the teachers. And just thank you for your time. Congratulations on your new role here as well. And, you know, I will just pick up on two things. One, that each of you said that you can feel not only on the tour, where we were joined by Rep. Lewis and Senator Spilka's office, but joy and partnership. You can feel it in this room by when you look around of who's shown up just because we're here today. This is why it's important for us to go around the state and do these meetings. It's kind of in our DNA to make sure that we're spending time with folks like you and organizations like this so that we can hear about, I mean, just on our tour, so many of the things that we talk about at this board meeting you mentioned as critical levers to what you're able to do here. And so thank you for making the time and for hosting us today. I know this is out of the day-to-day stuff, and I know it takes a lot of people and time to pull this off, and just grateful for it. So thank you.
Our pleasure.
Yeah. In addition to hearing from our folks here, on today's agenda, we'll discuss updates to child care financial assistance regulations, reviewing Governor Healy's budget, and diving into the latest data on Commonwealth Cares for Children, and hear an update on our IT modernization efforts. So big agenda ahead of us. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now I will turn it over to the Secretary for comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Heidi and Rick, thank you for hosting us today. I will channel the chair's thanks and appreciation for what it means to be on site and in community with you, and add, in addition to the wonderful things he said about seeing the program and experiencing the joy and also understanding the pain points, we also get great artwork.
Custom artwork here.
Custom artwork. Yeah. Mine is on full display from Damien. Please extend my thanks to him. He's in the Cardinal Room.
Alice shared some hearts with me in spirit of Valentine's Day. I mean,
fantastic.
this is awesome.
Yeah, that's
so,
right. So thank you all very much. And I will.
Names, artwork.
Let's everybody put their artwork
Hey.
on display.
Yeah.
All right, very good. You got to put it on the mic, Jen.
All right, thanks.
Make him go to sleep, maybe.
Yeah.
Sideways.
That's right. There we go. While I'm in the spirit of offering thanks, I want to do the same. Thanks and congratulations to the commissioner and her team, along with Maria Masitis and her team at the Office of the Child Advocate and the Center on Child Wellness and Trauma therein. We had the opportunity, the commissioner and myself, to be in community in Worcester last week for the launch of the Street Professional Development. That is an acronym. Let's see if I remember. Strategies, I'm cheating. Strategies for trauma responsive early educator training. For me personally, it meant a lot to be in that space with about 50 providers to watch the launch of this really important and impactful professional learning experience. But then also to hear directly from them why this meant so much to them and how they were planning to use this learning, bring it back to their respective communities. I just want to express thanks and congratulations. This is the kind of strategy that's going to have big impact. And in this current context, we know how deep the needs are. So thanks and congratulations and keep going. Meant a lot to be there. I also want to direct the remainder of my comments to what I think is top of mind for many people in this room or who might be watching right now, and what also might be a source of worry for many people. Over the past 2 weeks, there's been quite a few messages and signals and orders that are quite concerning to many people. And I want to name that many of these, particularly the orders, are not lawful, require acts of Congress to make them real and to take effect, and thus have been on the receiving end of many legal challenges for which I'm grateful. But the actions, those signals, those messages do sow lots of chaos. They sow confusion. And worse yet, in my opinion, they create fear. And they create fear among educators. They create fear among families. And they create fear among children. I have heard this consistently directly from providers, from members of community-based organizations, and from families directly. As it relates to children, the impact manifests in different ways, but we're hearing consistently the impact is manifesting through absenteeism, and that is tragic. I think it's important to sort of lift up and name those feelings and those thoughts and those concerns, to say to the broader community that we see you, we hear you, and as Heidi just said, we are in this together. I personally feel grateful to live in a state that can claim the distinction of being a national leader in the early education and care space. That is not a distinction that we arrived at through serendipity or through happenstance. It happened through intentional actions over a period of time. And we're going to hear a little bit more about that in the meeting. These are actions that sit atop a set of core values, right? A set of principles, not the least of which is every child, regardless of their circumstances, deserves a high quality, affordable, accessible early education and care experience. We've been working in furtherance of that principle over the past 2 years, and again, we're going to hear some of the results of that, and I'm excited to hear that. But I want to name that that's not going to stop that work. Across the Education Secretariat, we've got a list of core values as well that we've articulated. Chief among them are championing equity and inclusion and maintaining a holistic perspective. That was the case yesterday, it's the case right now today, and it's going to be the case tomorrow. I look forward to continuing this work. I look forward to partnering with the community to address the concerns, to keep the communication happening both ways. We will support each other. Again, I want to lift up what Heidi said. We will work together on this. We'll stay together. So that's my comment.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. We are in it together. Thank you for your leadership of setting the tone for all of us. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Secretary, for your comments and also for your steady and unwavering leadership at this time. I think it's a great comfort and resource for our staff, for the folks who work in the early education and care field, and has enabled us to continue to stay focused on our values and the work at hand, of which there is much to do and much to celebrate, even as we navigate the chaos. And our commitment is to, there are a lot of unknowns coming our direction, and our commitment is to stay together and to communicate whenever we can and to create spaces for us to be together and be in community, to share concerns, to share information when we have it, and to be as clear and present with all of our stakeholders as we possibly can, and to support the early education and care field and our team at EEC. I think there's also a lot of undermining of the value of our public servants, and I just want to say we don't abide that here. And just our deep respect for the incredible public servants that work across state government, and to my team at EEC, what we believe so deeply in the work that you all do. And you're going to see a lot of their talent on display today as well. Very specifically, I also wanted to make sure that the board was aware that we have been working closely with the Executive Office of Education and the Attorney General's Office, particularly in regard to recent immigration action. The Attorney General's Office issued guidance for all service providers that we made available to the early education and care field, as well as our staff yesterday, for service providers that work with migrant or immigrant families. And we are working with the Attorney General's Office on specific guidance for the early education and care sector. And when that guidance is available, we will make sure to distribute that and make it available. Also working on making sure that guidance is available in multiple languages as well. So again, our commitment to share information and to work to get resources out to the field as quickly as we can when they are available. Couple of other quick just updates from us. Actually, a couple personnel updates I wanted to make. So Eric Hansen is EEC's new, Eric, are you here? Can you just wave your hand? Can't see him on camera. There you go. Our new Chief Financial Officer. We are welcoming Eric from most recently the Executive Office of Labor and Workforce Development, but also spent some time in research and budget roles at the Department of Transitional Assistance, as well as the Executive Office of Administration and Finance. He, you will all be very happy to know, is an expert both in finance and data analytics, but also in caseload projecting and work, something we are welcoming him to EEC to do with us. So Eric, thank you for joining us. Congratulations, and we're really happy to have you here. I'm also really happy to introduce you to Gabby Santana Goldstein, who's here. Gabby. Gabby is entering a new role at the agency, a contracted role on employer partnerships. She's our employer partnerships manager. She's joining us most recently from the Executive Office of Economic Development, but has deep experience with the business community and in startups, and really supporting business development, both in the public and private sectors. And in this new role, all of you are aware that in this year's budget, we have about $2.5 million for a new employer-sponsored pilot partnership. And we kept looking around at the agency like, who can work on this for us? And we really realized that engaging our business community, both in making sure that they are stepping up with us as partners, but also making sure that they're supporting their working families as effectively as they can. And the other role that we're looking forward to having Gabby play is really thinking about the early education and care programs, including our family child care providers, as small businesses. And how do we make sure that the resources in the Commonwealth that are available to small businesses are available to our sector as small businesses? So Gabby, welcome to this new role. It's a new capacity for the agency, but something that we anticipate will also support implementation of the recommendations coming out of the task force. So welcome aboard. Thank you for joining us. And then I just want to mention two other EEC staff. So Marisol Rosado Ladeau, who was our regional director for this area and oversees all the licensing team, and then Noelle McCullough, who Heidi introduced. And there isn't a program I go to that Noelle doesn't license where people are just over the moon in gratitude for the partnership that Noelle brings to the licensing work, whether it's a brand new playground or opening new spaces or working during COVID to make sure we could get emergency childcare up and running. So Noelle, thank you for your incredible partnership. And then I just want to thank our hosts again. So Rick, thank you so much. And Heidi is a partner here and welcoming us here, but also helps make sure that the policies and the procedures and the work that we're doing to try and transform various aspects of the work that we do at the agency is done with the voice of the field. And so thank you for your leadership, Heidi. It was really amazing to be in the Cardinal classroom, but also with the chickadees and the macaws. And during all of that time, you heard Heidi say it, but we saw so much of the work that this board has led and that the agency has led. We saw folks who are participating in the apprenticeship program, a behavioral health specialist that's paid for through the C3 programs, increases in salaries across the board in the program. We saw the itinerant special education team working in the CPPI classroom, and our partners from the Framingham Public Schools were with us on that tour as well. We also know that a new social worker was able to be hired as a result of our new priority populations contract, which is exactly what we hoped would happen as a result of those contracts. So I think you might even have at least one staff that's still benefiting from child care financial assistance priority for staff in the program. And the playground, which is a little bit under snow, but is really beautiful, and I was here for the opening, was partially funded by a grant from our early education out of school time capital grant program. So the Ys are the biggest providers of childcare across the Commonwealth, and you guys really show up for your communities. And so I'm grateful for the Metro West Y and to you, Heidi and Rick, but also to our Ys across the Commonwealth who are partners with us in meeting the needs of kids and families, both generations, and multiple versions of their needs, whether it's food security or health and wellness and early education. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner. At this time, we're going to move to the public comment portion of the meeting. I'd like to call up Kelly Ford to speak. Kelly, we'd like to ask you to keep your comments to 3 minutes, and I also want to acknowledge that the board has received public comment by email. Kelly, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here. This is my first time attending a meeting, so I'm really excited.
Well, welcome. Thank you.
So, hello, Commissioner and Chairperson and Secretary and board members. So, yes, my name is Kelly Ford. I'm a Coordinated Family and Community Engagement and Parent-Child Plus Manager, and Making Opportunity Count is my lead agent. We are located in central Massachusetts, and we service 10 towns in our area. So I heard a lot of community and gratitude, and we are here to extend that same thing. So I'm speaking on behalf of CFC programs in our Commonwealth, and we would like to express our gratitude for the funding that we receive and to share with you the ways that we're using funding in our programs to support the families that live in our communities. And if it's okay, if I could just have a hand raised, because we have fellow CCFC members here, if you could just say hello. They're here in support of each other. So, as you know, at the core of the CFCEs, we address developmental, social, emotional, and community needs of the youngest residents in the Commonwealth and their caregivers. So they foster healthy development, reduce caregiver isolation, and promote early learning and literacy success. So for most families, CFCEs are their first and only experience with EEC programming, and we're the ones that touch their lives first. Our program attendees, their foster families, their grandparents raising grandchildren or grandparents as caregivers, where they're stay-at-home dads, they're stay-at-home moms, they're one-parent families, they're multi-generational families, and they're working parents. They're balancing work life and rearing children. They're first-time parents, parents with multiple children, and for years they seek, enjoy, and need support that we can offer them. They're from rural towns, suburbs, and our downtown cities. So our programs are centered around child development and interactions through play. And we're having lots of fun while we do this. We discuss ages and stages of development. We provide a safe place for adults and share to share their experiences with parenting, their home life, their challenges, and their wins. And all the while, we're providing referrals for food, fuel assistance, or offering parent workshops about self-regulation, nutrition, potty training, and the like. We are singing, we're dancing, we're laughing with the children and the adults. And again, they're just coming back for this support all the time. CFC programs offer unique community connections that each one develops in their own way. And we're always reaching out to community members to build those connections. And we find that we're being valued in those communities. And again, as we always look to be valued with our continued funding from all of you. So thank you. Our funding priorities will always continue to be our workforce, our program stability, and our family access. And I would like to just say a couple of statements that parents have given us to bring to you today. If I could just share a couple of those before I finish. This one really resonated with me from a parent I had at a program. She said, "When I say that play groups have honestly been a lifesaver for me, I'm being completely serious. With no local family support, I felt alone and isolated. With the play groups, I was able to get out of the house and get my child started with social interactions. I learned about and signed up for Parent Child Plus through play groups, and that helped me better understand early childhood development, as well as providing educational challenges and puzzles for my now toddler. The CFC programs are amazing, and I'm so thankful for all the advice, friends, activities that came with my family attending play groups. Thank you." And there are a few more stated here, and I know for time purposes, I won't read them all, but we're of value in our community, and we really cherish the families that we work with. So thank you for your time listening to me today.
Thanks for being here, Kelly. Thank you. I'd like to next invite up Daniela Ferrara. Daniela, welcome.
Hello, thank you. I'm really honored to speak today. I am a participant of the ECAF program that Kelly just spoke about as a parent, and I will stress a first-time parent here in Framingham. I can't speak enough about how important that program has been to my family. I am balancing a full-time job and having a toddler at home, and so you can imagine the difficulty that might pose. And so we first learned about the program 2 years ago. My daughter's now almost 3, and at 1 year old, we went to the library and saw this play group, happening, and we decided to jump in. And some of her instructors and leaders in the program are here, Jane and Gracie, who have been phenomenal. Some of the testimony that Kelly had spoke about is really true. Being a first-time parent with really, same as me, no family around, you feel really isolated. You don't know where to start. You know that your child needs to meet milestones and be, social with other children, but if you're not in a, center-based school or family home daycare, you don't have that ability all that often. So the play group is where we started, and it's just been phenomenal from, having ideas and strategies about how to manage toddler tantrums or, partnering with other families that are going through the same things like potty training or sleep regressions or teething, has just been really valuable on a parent's aspect of things. But I can definitely see my child's growth and development through the times that we've spent in the play group. And again, now being 2 years into it, I feel like, she's right there with everybody else, and I have no hesitations, but that's really because of this grant, and being able to have those resources here that I can participate with her, learn myself of how to engage in those play-based learning, but also, really just learn about parenting for the first time with other parents and with leaders that guide us through those groups. So Again, just wanted to thank you all, and I hope the grant continues and really can benefit so many other families as we can continue with it. So, thank you.
Thank you, Danielle.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. And next I have Ana Teresa Farias. Nice to see you.
Hello, thank you.
Yeah.
I have my cheat sheet, so I don't go into Portuguese mode. Good afternoon, members of the board. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Ana Teresa Farias, and I'm the training coordinator for Metro Boston PDC at Early Education Leaders. I also run a support group for Portuguese-speaking educators. This support group is called Helping Hands. I come here today to highlight to you how amazing family child care programs are, and to share a question about why the family child care rate changes when a child turns 2. FCC programs are diverse and unique. As a mother who has used family child care on 2 separate occasions, my family is grateful to have our children be cared for by amazing educators who speak our language and share our cultural background. I'm also a former family child care coordinator and coach who has worked with many Portuguese-speaking family child care programs. I also come here today as an adjunct professor at Urban College of Boston, where I teach Portuguese classes to educators who don't have enough English proficiency to be in an English classroom. Over the course of 15 years, I have met wonderful Brazilian FCC educators. It is safe to say that the cultural diversity that they share brings positive outcomes to their local communities. As I look back, I can see that the state has made significant progress. FCC programs received another daily rate increase this past month, C3 grants are secured, and accessibility to ECE courses in other languages have all improved the quality of care they provide. We can say that FCC programs are being recognized by everyone, and there is still more to do. There is an issue that FCC educators face. This brings me to my question. Along with other FCC educators, we wonder why FCC programs that accept vouchers, the daily rate decreases when the child turns 2. This decrease in the rate affects their program tremendously. It is important to address this decrease in reimbursement rate because FCC educators still face the same challenges while caring for toddlers, some of which include potty training, behavior, and keeping the assistant's pay consistent. I don't think the rate changes in other settings when the child turns 2. As I mentioned before, FCC programs are unique. In centers, you see a change in classroom size, but for FCC programs, there are no changes. The child turns 2, but he or she receives the same care. In a perfect world, the perfect solution would be to not have any decrease in the rates for FCC programs. But I understand there are many factors involved in making this change. As an advocate, I encourage you and the leaders at EEC to take a deeper look into this matter. I am happy to connect with you after the meeting to provide more information. We appreciate all the progress and improvements, but there is always room for more. Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Is anyone else here in the room here for public comment? All right, we have one additional piece of routine business that I'd like to just do. On July 25th, 2024, the Commonwealth's Human Resource Department announced salary increases for eligible managers in the executive branch for 2025, of which Commissioner Kershaw is eligible. A board vote is necessary so the commissioner can participate in the program. I'd like to make a motion that the board approves the salary adjustment for Commissioner Kershaw consistent with the salary increase that the Commonwealth's Human Resource Division announced on July 25th, 2024 for all eligible managers in the executive branch. Can I have a second? Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Great, thank you. And thank you, Commissioner, for your accomplishments. Not only, I know you are eligible by the letter of the policy, but it's also well-deserved, so thank you.
And we do have 2 members on remote, at least 2.
Yes. Correct. Yes.
Great, thank
I
you.
believe Georgia Tanasoff and Jamela
Jamela
Lee.
Lee, yep.
And we're expecting Nikki Ruiz shortly.
Great. Do we want to take a quick pause?
Do we think that's, sorry, for those of you who can't see at
Yeah.
home, there are flashing lights. I was like, somebody's gonna get a migraine. It's gonna be me or somebody else, so.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think if
I
that,
think we're good?
okay, terrific.
All right, great, thank you.
And the minutes?
And the last piece of routine business is approval of the minutes from the January 15th, 2025 board meeting. Are there any additions, corrections, or edits? Hearing none, I'd make the motion to approve the minutes of the January 15th, 2025 board meeting as amended. Can I have a second? Not amended. Can I have a second? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Any abstentions?
Abstain.
Cheryl, note that Cheryl abstained, and the minutes are approved. Thank you. All right, Commissioner, I'll turn it over to you. for
Thank
the
you so
agenda.
much. Yes, I want to invite Tyrese Nicholas and Rob Orthman and Stephanie Collmore up to join us. I am just, while they are joining us, I'm going to remind the board that we are moving through our business from the FY25 budget. So as I mentioned, Gabby Goldstein's hiring is part of our sort of at making good on some of the work that we were assigned, partly from the legislature and partly through the governor through the FY25 budget. So also included in the FY25 budget. Oh, sorry.
It's a team effort here.
No. We got the order right. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in the FY25 budget, there was what we call outside section language, so language that actually changes Mass General Law, so statutory requirements related to our child care financial assistance program. And many of these changes that were included in that outside section and ultimately changed the enabling statute for the agency governing child care financial assistance really codify existing things that the agency already did or that this board took action on in creating the revised child care financial regulations with a few small exceptions. So in order for us to meet the obligations that were included in the FY25 budget, we are going to be discussing some necessary changes to and updates to our existing child care financial assistance regulations. And our legal and policy team are here to share why we're talking about this today and what some of those changes are. So thank you. I'll turn it over to you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. As the commissioner just alluded to, the impetus behind today's regulation changes are language in an outside section of the fiscal year 2025 budget, which just codifies our child care financial assistance program in statute. As she mentioned, most of the language that was inserted into the statute represents things that the agency is already doing. Tyrese will elaborate on a couple of the things that are a little bit new. Just as a backdrop, though, I will just remind everybody that we did engage in a pretty comprehensive review of the child care financial assistance regulations pretty recently, with the most recent version of the regulations going into effect in October of 2023. Many of you probably remember that, but I just wanted to sort of highlight that. So if you're wondering why there aren't more comprehensive changes happening, we did that pretty recently. And the last thing I'll contribute is that if we approve these regulations, then it will allow us to also update our policies and procedures to align with the statute as well as the regulations. And with that, I'll hand it over to Tyrese.
Thanks, Stephanie. Afternoon, everyone. So a high level of just the summary, as Stephanie already spoke about, in October of 2023, we revised our regulations and our policies. So some of the information that we're looking to have voted on is in that. There are four items that we're essentially codifying. One is a big one, which is increasing eligibility for childcare financial assistance from 50% at entry to 85%. By increasing that 85% entry for all families, we are also now required to prioritize families that are at 50% of SMI. So in our current regulations and policies, the entry level is 50%. For most families. And then for families who are early education and care staff or disabled, their entry level was 85%. So with this change, everyone's entry and exit will be 85% SMI. And then we'll be looking to explore how we prioritize those families that are at 50% or below. The second change is really something we're doing. We already prioritize a number of families. So we prioritize our homeless families, our families working in early education and care programs, our young parents, or what we like to call parents under 24, as well as our families that are experiencing domestic violence. 3 of those priorities are already in our regulations and in our policies and procedures. The one that is not is our families that are working in early education and care programs. So now we're going to codify that into our regulations and our policies and procedures. That's pretty exciting. And then the next one is something most programs we believe already do that we're aware of, is they're not counting childcare financial assistance towards a public benefit program. Right, so that is actually, we're adding that in case there is any public benefit program that we're unaware of that may be doing that. Now, childcare financial assistance will not be countable income for a family. And then the last one is really ensuring that there's continuous quality improvement across the childcare financial assistance program. So really making sure that we're streamlining our processes and continuing to do what we said we would do. Right, which is ensure that our processes aren't creating more burdens for families or for educators that are working with us or our providers. And so that's across our paperwork, our systems, and our policies and procedures. I'm going to turn it over to Rob.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Just to go over what the timeline will look like. So we're obviously here today presenting these draft regulations. If you vote in the affirmative, they will go out for public comment. The Secretary of the Commonwealth will receive them. We will post notice on the EEC website, as well as provide notice to relevant legislators and other interested parties. Folks can provide comment if they'd like on any of the revisions or any of the overall policies as well. We'll take in whatever we receive. We will consider it. We may revise what we present based on that. Reminder that much of this is statutory, so we're obviously not going to revise what the legislature is requiring, but there may be opportunities based on comment we receive to revise some of it, similar as we did on the broad scale revisions about a year and a half ago, like Stephanie mentioned. Once public comment period is over, we will present back to the board a quote unquote final revisions, which the board will then consider at a subsequent meeting, and then at that point we'll vote on. If you do vote in the affirmative, they will then go to the Secretary of the Commonwealth for official publishing in the state register, and they will then be in effect. And at that point, the statutory requirement will match the regulatory requirement, and everything will be tied up in a bow, and we will be ready to go, legally speaking. I had to add that part, you know.
Thank you, Rob.
So I will turn it over. Speaking of legally speaking, so I just for the formal requirement, and then I'll turn it over to the board for a formal motion. EEC is seeking approval of the draft amended Child Care Financial Assistance Regulations, that is 606 CMR Section 10, to comply with Mass General Law Chapter 15D, Section 13A, and to authorize the Commissioner to file the amended regulations with the Secretary of the Commonwealth for publication and public comment, subject to approval of the final regulations by the board.
Any questions or comments from the board?
I just have a question.
Dr. Lucas.
How will the public be notified? I see that in the slides, EEC has discretion over what that public comment period looks like. So I'm just curious if you all have thoughts on what that looks like.
the public comment period statutorily needs to be at least 21 days. This public comment period will be longer than that. I think we're looking at potentially 45 to 60 days. I think that's right, Commissioner.
I think we'll take the full 60. I think we want as much opportunity as we can. And it's also important to note that even making the regulatory change is not all that needs to happen in order for us to implement these changes. There will be IT changes, there'll be policy and procedural updates, there'll be training with some of our, financial assistance, access administrators in the field. So we will be working on the level of effort and sort of laying the groundwork for those during the public comment period. But so there would be an effective date that follows even the promulgation likely, just based on when we can technically get it implemented. And at current funding levels, many of you are aware, and we'll be talking about this in the next agenda item, that we do currently have some, significant controls in place in terms of childcare financial assistance. So there are no families who would be sort of eligible at this moment, even if we were able to make that change more quickly.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions from any other board members? Hearing, seeing none, I'd make a motion that the Board of Early Education and Care, in accordance with General Law, Chapter 15D, Section 3, hereby approves the draft amended regulations governing child care financial assistance and authorizes the Commissioner of Early Education and Care to file the amended regulations with the Secretary of the Commonwealth for publication of a notice of public comment in the Massachusetts Register, consistent with the Department's proposed policy directions and subject to the approval of the final regulations after a public comment period by the Board. Can I have a second?
Second.
Second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Great, thank you. Motion passes.
Thank you very much. We look
Thank
forward to sharing, and I will just, remind everyone that even the increase to 85% of state median income was part of the governor's Gateway to Pre-K agenda. It is the federally allowable maximum, and should there be, or in a future date, additional funds coming from the federal government, we will be well positioned to be able to take advantage of those funds, obviously. But also many of the policies and procedures that the agency has been promoting with the support of this board, including prioritizing our staff. So building the system that we want to see as we, continue to hopefully see growth around funding in the system as well. Thank you to the team.
Thank you.
Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You.
What's that? Me. Yeah. I am going to give the board budget update on the governor's H1 FY26 budget, but I may need to call on Catherine Harvell, our Chief Operating Officer, our new Chief Financial Officer, and Tyrese again. So they are at the ready should you all have questions.
Great.
You have it? Who's driving?
I can drive.
Thank you.
Want me to drive?
That's okay, you got it, I think. Okay, so the governor released 2 weeks ago, her FY26, we call it House 1 because it's the first year of the legislative session, budget proposal for FY26. And I just want to say this is a great budget for EEC again. We feel incredibly fortunate for the continued support and increases that are still supporting early education and care. And if you look across state government, this is not the case in every one of our agencies, and representing the priority for this administration around early education and care and the support for us. And so just starting by reminding everyone that many of the new investments or the investments that the governor's proposed are aligned with our Gateway to Pre-K agenda, which was launched just about this time last year, a little bit earlier, which continues to press the multiple levers that we believe are necessary to continue the stabilizing, healing, and transforming within the early education and care system. And as I said, we saw many of these investments on display today during our tour, and I think demonstrating the importance of it can't just be about facilities or universal pre-K or just teacher salaries, but it has to be investing in the full set of levers that are needed to support family access and affordability, meaningful career pathways, and compensation for our teachers, as well as beautiful facilities and places that our families can go. So we see continued investment through the CPPI, or Commonwealth Preschool Partnership Initiative. I'll get into this a little bit, but the governor basically filed her budget in two parts. A typical House One budget, which includes our line item language, and then a supplemental budget, which was surplus funding from the Fair Share Amendment, which makes significant new investments, including a 3-year commitment to the Commonwealth Preschool Partnership Initiative. So funding this year, which would allow us to continue supporting all the existing communities, as well as growth within the communities that are in the planning phases, and then 2 additional years of continued support and growth within new communities and our existing communities. So, and then one of the biggest priorities that this board has and the agency was making sure that some of the growth and expansion that we've seen in our child care financial assistance system would be continued to be supported through this fiscal year and into next fiscal year. Governor funds our child care financial assistance systems at $1.1 billion, making sure that we're able to fully implement the contracts that we initiated in October and continue to serve all the families that are currently in the system. We are also anticipating ongoing growth within our DCF and DTA caseloads, so this funding level will allow us to continue to support sustained caseloads across our child care assistance accounts, but will necessitate continued limits on our income eligible caseload, we anticipate at this time. And then finally, the headline, I buried the headline, the Commonwealth Cares for Children program, maintaining that at $475 million, which is a level fund or continued funding from last year. Last year's budget also included language that made that program permanent, and here we are now 3 years in, fully funding it at state with state dollars. Just a reminder for the board, this was originally a federal era COVID stabilization grant program, and we are the only state in the country that has maintained this funding at the full level with state dollars. And we are going to be really pleased a little later in the agenda to share with you some of the impacts that we're seeing from this continued support. I don't want to ruin the presentation, but the headline is it's working. And we are continue to be incredibly grateful for the support of the governor and the legislature for this important program that we see creating all kinds of changes for staff, for families, and for our programs. So just some quick additional highlights. So Commonwealth Cares for Children at $475, over $1 billion for our child care financial assistance programs, allowing us to maintain access for all the families that have come into the caseload over the last year, and we anticipate coming into FY26, and support for the CPPI program. And then level funding for many of other of our existing programs, whether it's our CFCEs, who we hear about, and their important and critical work across the community, our child care resource and referral agencies, supplemental funds for our Head Start programs and partners across the Commonwealth, and continuing support for our early childhood mental health grants. I am not going to go into this one in great detail, but as I mentioned in the beginning, the governor filed 2 separate sort of pieces of budget legislation. One is her House One proposal, which includes all of our line items, and you can see each of the line items on the left, and on the right, the funding level for FY26 in those line items. She also filed a supplemental budget for $150 million. And again, this is from surplus funding from the Fair Share Amendment, which we are fortunate to be part of funding for. There's $100 million for funds to support kind of continued growth around the capacity of the early education and care sector, access and affordability, which could take the form of supporting caseload in this fiscal year, should that be needed. Could be support for our task force implementation, so we look forward to that report being released soon, and some concrete recommendations in the short term, as well as recommendations in the longer term. So a real commitment to continued capacity building and support for the initiatives that the department has underway and that we have in partnership with our other agencies across state government. And then it's $50 million for the CPPI program, which is intended to support growth over 3 years. And we're really grateful for this approach because, as many of you are aware, the way the CPPI program works is we sort of fund a planning grant, and then we fund advanced planning, and then we fund implementation. So a multi-year support for this grant program is actually a really excellent match for how we can work with communities around growing that program in a consistent way. And then wanting to mention things that are sort of outside the EEC line item and budget world, but are really essential to us and to the work that we're doing. So $25 million for our literacy launch initiative that we're working with for the Executive Office of Education, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. And we were recently at an event announcing the first round of grants for that program. And that goes from preschool up to third grade, supporting evidence-based literacy in partnerships with school districts and community-based programs. And so really excited about continued opportunity to support that program through the governor's proposal. And then $5 million to continue the development of our really early childhood through higher education mental health framework that's being led out of the Secretary's office. So happy to have you say anything about both of those two initiatives, but a lot of work happening across the education continuum. So even if the funding doesn't exist within EEC's budget, there's support for early childhood education and the growth of our sector and the support of our educators and our programs happening in various parts across state government. Anything you want to add on this?
No, I'm just basking in the wonderfulness of what you just said.
And then we have provided, again, I'm not going to go walk through in detail, but wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of the sort of FY25 GAA, which is the General Appropriations Act, which is effectively where we landed at the end of FY25. So that's the current fiscal year that we're in, and these are the funds that are allocated for funding this year, comparing to what the governor's proposed budget does across line items. So pointing out a couple things for the board here that might be of interest. In this year's budget, we had $15 million, which was actually in our admin account. 7.5 for expanding early childhood scholarships. Earlier this year, the board took action to support us to work with the Department and Board of Higher Education to expand our existing scholarship program to new recipients and expand what kind of resources and support applicants and awardees could receive. Thank you for that action. It's already happening across, and we met some of the educators benefiting from the scholarship program today. At last month's meeting, you took action to help us move forward $7.5 million in a brand new loan repayment program, also being done in collaboration. So those programs are moving forward in this fiscal year. Brand new resources that we're working on getting out the door right now. They're not included in the House One budget proposal for FY26, so you can see a delta there in that line item. And then the Career Pathways program. As you're aware, in this year's budget, we had $5 million for that program, which is really a $10 million program. We were able to make it fully whole through the additional early childhood scholarship programs. We are working very closely with our partners in higher education to make sure that the piece of that program that funds tuition and fees could potentially be picked up by Mass Educate or Mass Reconnect and the other efforts around free community college. So there's a big and broad commitment to making sure that our educators are continuing to be able to, we met some Career Pathways students today. It's a really important pipeline into the higher education system. So that is an area that we are continuing to work with our partners in higher education on as well to make sure that the resources are there. And then the complicating thing a little bit about the way our budget is structured now, which is wonderful and a little bit complicated, is that we have multiple funding sources. So some of our accounts are funded fully from the general fund. Some are funded from the fair share. So we just are breaking it down here so folks can see what the source of funds are across our various line items. And again, really fortunate to be part of that fair share amendment and one of the agencies who are seeing growth in our budget. So all told, we are in the governor's budget proposed at nearly $1.7 billion, which is an incredible growth over the last several years, and again, expressing the commitment. So I'm going to stop there and see if the board has questions.
Any questions, comments? None?
I would just underscore what the commissioner said about working on the pathways piece. As most of you know, I'm at a community college, and I'm happy to volunteer to be part of any of those brainstorming conversations and thinking about that blending and braiding conversation.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I will channel what the commissioner said about a real commitment to figuring this out. We feel very optimistic about figuring it out. The commissioner said earlier, the headline for C3 is that it's working. I'd say, thankfully, we're on the receiving end of significant increases in financial aid, and it's also working in the higher ed sector. But we want to make sure that as we continue, removing those barriers to access, that we're also keeping in mind the pathways programs, certificate programs, and there's a real commitment to ensuring that. So look forward to working with you on it.
Thank you.
And just a reminder to the board that we are just the very first step of the formal budget process. So this is the governor's proposal. And then there are several other steps where the House of Representatives in April will release their proposal. In May, the Senate will release their proposal. And in June, there'll be a conference committee between the House and Senate that come together and decide on their final proposal that they can agree on and then send to the governor. We are ever hopeful that this will be the first in 14 years with an on-time budget. It would be great for the agency, but we'll see what happens there. And before we see this board again, we will likely have an opportunity, along with the secretary and the commissioners of higher ed and K-12, to offer testimony in front of the Joint Ways and Means Committee regarding the governor's House One budget and how it supports the priorities of this board, our secretariat, and of the agency. So we'll look forward to sharing that testimony with you when that gets scheduled.
Yeah, I'd just like to add, I think it's often said a budget is a reflection of values, right? And you talked about values in your opening comment, and, a 10% increase when you look at the growth of this budget over the last couple of years and the work that we're doing. I think also at the heart of this is, again, amplifying something you said in your comments, Commissioner, is an incredible team of public servants that are doing really good work. And I think you also want to invest in people and things that are working and people that are doing really good work. And so I think this budget is reflective of the team that has been assembled at the department that is helping to facilitate a lot of important government stuff on behalf of a really important field and people and families, and the constant listening about how to do it better. And that feels good to invest in as well. And that's reflective. And I want to thank the secretary. Please extend thanks to the governor for this great starting position that we have in this timeline as the process unfolds. So thank you.
Great. Okay, with that, I think the one of the big headlines in the budget is really focused on sort of access. And at last month's meeting, our vice chair, and I think several of you asked if we could come back and give a quick update on where we are on caseloads in general in terms of childcare financial assistance. So going to share a quick update with you, and I'm going to start with a couple big caveats for a second. Our caseloads are in a time of pretty significant flux at this moment. So we are here presenting where we are in the caseload, but I also want to share that there's a lot of what I was calling noise in the caseload right now. So we implemented brand new contracts starting October 1. There are big changes associated with that and some shifts. So for example, you heard here they have a brand new priority populations contract here in Framingham. Which means new kids are being enrolled here. There may be some other programs that did not receive funding that are now, we're transitioning children into the voucher. So we ensure continuity of care for all the kids that were currently receiving child care financial assistance. We did bring in some new providers into the system. We did lean into additional infant slots. So there is a pretty significant transition happening right now as some families move in from contracts to vouchers, and as programs come up and running into the new contract system. We've also had, as I've mentioned in the past, some anticipated and some unanticipated growth within our DTA and DCF caseloads. So those are kind of on the move as well. So we're presenting the data as we have it today. But the third thing I want to mention is that the department itself is in a transition in terms of how we project caseload. And some of that is based on new capacity that we have, and we have a data and analytics team and new staff within our our fiscal team. Typically, the agency has projected caseload based on payments, so the number of kids that we're actually paying for. But payments can be made sometimes up to 6 weeks after a service has been provided. And so one of the things we're doing is moving away from sort of basing our full caseload data. That's going to be a very important piece of information that we continue to monitor and understand. But we really want to move towards a system where we're looking at the placements of kids and the authorizations of kids. So for example, one of the things you'll see in the data is a big uptick in the summer months, right? So we have authorizations for families who only need summer care. And so we might not be paying for them this month, but we know they're coming in June. So by looking at authorizations and placements and payments, we think we'll be able to give the board and our field a much better and more accurate sense of like, who is in the system now, who are we sort of liable for over the next year, and therefore, when and if we're able to open access, it'll be based on a much more solid understanding of exactly who's in the caseload right now and who we anticipate coming in over the course of a year. We're also working very closely with our colleagues at DCF and DTA, so if there are policy changes or changes in caseload in those agencies that would impact our caseloads in childcare, at EEC we'll have a better chance. So that's a very long caveat to say we're going to present the data that we have today that's based on sort of who we're paying for in the system at this moment as this noise and as sort of what's happening, the sort of dynamics in the caseload settle in a bit, and I think we'll have more ability to continue to report with greater and greater accuracy over the months ahead. So this shows you child care financial assistance caseloads over time. We've included some of the big milestones that happened, whether it was when the pandemic hit or when we made certain specific policy changes, implemented our new pilot around serving families. And you can see a big uptick as we implemented the pilot. Runaway success in terms of serving staff that are working in early education and care programs, really important way to increase compensation. Also reflected here, you can see is when we implemented some controls, you can also see that summer fluctuation that I mentioned. So we are at about 62. We are projecting right now, as of December, about 62,000 kids in the current caseload that we paid for in December. And here you can see it by program. So the yellow is our income eligible program. So that's for our low income working families. Those are the families who access child care financial assistance through the waiting list. So they first must touch down on the waiting list, serve generally on a first come, first served basis, or by priorities, as we talked about today, that have been established, whether it's families experiencing homelessness or our staff working in early education and care programs. At the current moment, our limits on income eligible, there's some joy happening right above our heads right now. Love to hear that. There's definitely some jumping going on up there, so that's some joyful jumping. We like that. Right now, we anticipate maintaining the existing controls that are in our in the income eligible population in terms of new families being served from the wait list with vouchers. So it is open for continuity of care. So that means kids who are aging up or transitioning from our program or transitioning from DCF or DTA. It is also open for families who are referred from the Department of Transitional Assistance are able to receive vouchers right now. So, but the income eligible population is fairly limited in terms of access at this moment. And then you can see DCF in blue and DTA in red. So tracking the caseloads separately. You can see some pretty significant growth happening within those two caseloads over the more recent time period. Finally, I know the board is always interested in knowing where we are on the child care financial assistance waiting list. As I said, this is for our income eligible families who are waiting to receive a voucher. Although families may also be served in our contracted providers coming off the waiting list through income eligible contracts. So as of January, we had about 30,000 families on the waiting list for child care financial assistance. And I'll remind everyone too that we don't do a full eligibility check before someone is allowed to go on the waiting list. We do what we're calling a soft check or a preliminary check. So where they attest to income eligibility and service need. So we have a fairly good sense of when they come on the waiting list that they're likely to be eligible, but this is not an eligibility list or a placement list. It is those who've indicated an interest in child care financial assistance and have attested to the general eligibility guidelines for the income eligible program. We will continue to track and report on the caseload trends over the next several months. And as I said, as things settle down a little bit, I think we'll have a better sense of exactly what we're looking at for this fiscal year as well as next. But we are incredibly grateful that the governor's budget at about $1.1 billion supports all the kids that are enrolling and those we anticipate coming into the caseload as a result of some growth within DCF and DTA and as we implement those contracts into FY26. Questions from the board?
Any questions?
Thank you. It's really helpful.
Yeah, I just echo thanks and no pressure to Eric, the new guy. But to be honest, what I appreciate is I always think about the arc of the work here within the department and being able to take the tools and the departments and the people talent that you have to really put at the table to figure out the trend, like to just deepen the understanding of kind of what's happening and how it's happening and projecting and like this is just this is good work, right? And it's long overdue, but it's because you got the talent and the tools in place to do it that'll better inform budgeting and better inform decision making and better inform how we deliver high quality, accessible, affordable care to children and families across the Commonwealth. So just super important work, and thank you for just sharing the data, but also talking about where the work is headed, which I think is also equally important.
One more thing is, this is a super unfinished thought, but this is really good data in terms of planning, like what other collaborations could be happening at every city. I mean, it really worries me that the demand is so much higher for school age. These children are, they may have nowhere to go after school. So that looks very different in different cities. And this is where the Boys and Girls Clubs or the YMCAs and the different programs, come in for certain cities and that really have limited resources.
Yeah.
Yes, one reason that's really important for us to track the data, whether it's using it to procure new contracts or understand where additional resources or in working with our community partners who may be providing child care financial assistance as well. So we understand where the needs are at a greater level. So thank you.
Any other comments or questions before we take a quick break? All right, thank you, Commissioner, for that update on the budget. And again, gratitude to the Secretary as well for your leadership on the step one of this budget process as well and for the information provided. With that, we'll take a 5-10 minute break. We'll be back in a few minutes. Back, I'm going to hand it over to the Commissioner to tee up our next agenda item, which is an update on the Commonwealth Cares for Children.
And I'm very happy to turn it over to Jocelyn Bowen, Adrian Murphy, and Ashley White, who are going to share latest program updates on the Commonwealth Cares for Children program. And I gave away the headline, but I'll save the rest of the story for you guys. Thank you, Commissioner. It's great to be back. Very pleased to be here providing an update on some of the things we're learning from C3 in an ongoing way. Just a very quick regrounding and reminder, C3 has been in existence for over 3 years since the pandemic, when it began as a program to stabilize program operations and maintain our license capacity. Over time, it's evolved into a funding source that has really been important for programs in addressing workforce challenges, addressing affordability issues for families, and continuing to invest in building the quality of the programs in our system. We have, through the C3 recertification process, as well as periodic surveys, been collecting data in an ongoing way on changes over time in some of these key areas of field and program growth. First of all, thinking about program stability. Originally, this program was just maintaining license capacity. We have seen continued growth in license capacity over the time. It is now 5% greater than pre-pandemic levels. The number of programs are 5% greater than in pre-pandemic levels. And if you look back over the last 2 years, we've seen a growth of more than 17,000 license slots in the system. We also see continued.
We'll just gloss over that. That's
I've got my points to make. We also see, this is a big one too, because we also see continued growth in educator compensation. 20% if you look back across the past 3 years, which is significant growth over time. And if just considering the most recent 2 years, where we have seen the workforce start to come back from some of the challenges that we've had, we've seen turnover rates decline by about 6%. So we do see improvement in educator retention, although it's still higher than we'd like it to be. And finally, in thinking about family access and the ways in which programs continue to think about tuition and when and how they raise rates for families, we do find that for programs in low and very low communities, opportunity communities, they're far less likely to raise rates on an annual basis. So that we do see that's happening as well. And I'm going to turn it over to Adrian and Ashley to dig into some of the details.
Great, thanks, Jocelyn. So I'll start by talking a little bit about some of the data that we're tracking regularly around the growth of our license system and some other contextual data to really ground the C3 survey results. Then I'll turn it over to Ashley to talk through some of the results of our most recent C3 survey. And I just want to acknowledge before we get started that Ashley and I are up here presenting these slides, but it was really a team effort I don't think there's a single member of either of our teams that didn't help contribute to these slides today, so really grateful for that. So I'll start with some data on the growth in the number of licensed programs statewide. As Jocelyn mentioned, we've now seen growth across all program types, family child care programs as well as center-based programs. And really notably, we've continued to see this growth in the most recent months after the formula changes that we implemented in 2024. We also break this data down. This is actually a graph that's from our public-facing KPI dashboard. So you can also check it out there. We break this down to look at this net increase in programs by newly opened programs as well as program closures. The newly opened programs in yellow and closed programs in red. And we can see that this growth is really driven largely by the opening of new programs. With our license system netting more new programs than closed programs in all but 2 months over the past 2.5 years. This is really being driven by new programs. And this increase in the number of programs is also translating into an increase in statewide license capacity across all program types. So now all program types have a license capacity about 7% more than it did in the immediate pre-COVID period. And we've seen over the past 2 years, as Jocelyn mentioned, more than 11,000 new center-based seats and almost 6,000 new licensed FCC seats in the past 2 years. When we look at this growth by region, we see that center-based license capacity has increased relative to the pre-pandemic period across all licensing regions, with the highest growth in the Metro Boston licensing region, followed by the Southeastern Cape region. In the case of FCCs, we see more variation in growth by regions, with especially high growth in the Metro Boston region and the Northeast, which we attribute in part to our work, but also the work of our many partner organizations in those regions that are working to build FCC capacity locally in those areas. And then we also have looked at the growth in our license capacity based on where programs fall on the Child Opportunity Index, or COI. As a reminder, this is the new place-based measure that we've incorporated into the C3 formula, and it's really meant to reflect opportunities for children and families in particular local areas. We see from the data that our license capacity has grown relative to pre-pandemic levels across all Child Opportunity Index areas, with the highest growth in our very low opportunity areas, which are the areas, and we'll talk about in a little bit, that we are providing increased C3 funding to through the new C3 formula. And then last but not least, before we dig into the survey data, we've also been continuing to monitor C3 participation as the new formula takes effect. Overall, we see a positive trend here with regular dips in the summer months as programs that are not open during the summer are not able to apply for C3 for those months. We've seen a slight leveling off since November, but we are seeing about the same number of applicants in November as we saw prior to any of the formula changes in the spring of 2024. And we're certainly continuing to monitor this as we continue to roll out the new formula. So I think want to dig a little bit into the results of our most recent C3 survey, which we launched in August 2024. The data you'll see in the next few slides and that Ashley will talk through represents more than 7,300, almost 7,400 licensed and funded early education and care providers. That represents almost 90% of our field. And we saw in response to the survey high participation rates across all program types and all regions, with especially high participation from programs that participate in EEC's Child Care Financial Assistance Program. And I'll turn it over to Ashley to walk through the survey data.
Thanks, Adrian. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Ashley.
Wanted to just, as Adrian said, start by going through some of the survey data. This was collected in August of 2024. One of the things that we sort of consistently collect through these surveys is how programs are spending their C3 dollars. And so, as you can see on this slide, programs are continuing to report spending a high proportion of their C3 funds on workforce-related expenses over time. So, things like compensation for their educators. And so we've got 68% of programs, 68 of all funds being spent on those workforce investments and expenses that we talked about, compared to 66% in the fall of 2023, so a slight increase since the last time that we surveyed folks. You can also see on this slide that there are some differences in terms of center-based programs versus family child care programs in terms of how they choose to use these dollars. With center-based programs spending a majority of their funds on workforce related expenses. And less so on the family child care side, but that is because we also see in the data that they're spending a good proportion of their funds on things like rent and mortgages and expenses such as that.
So they would be spending on.
So not notably different over time, but continuing to spend these funds on workforce-related priorities. We also collect educator wages over time, and just to sort of highlight I think the graph is just slightly deceiving. It actually goes back to November 2021, even though the graph says it sort of indicates that it starts in January 2022. It's just a axis thing. And so you can see wages going up over time. On the left, we've got the average hourly wages for center-based programs like early education programs. And again, you can see a good increase there. It's about 20% for teachers and assistant teachers over time, which I think exceeds inflation over that period. So a true increase in wages there. On the right side are the wages for center-based school-age programs. Again, you're seeing sort of similar trends with wages increasing there, ranging from sort of 13% to 20% over that same time period. In the survey, we also asked about educator benefits. So the question was asking programs if they provide any benefits, particularly for certain staff. And so each column sort of represents the staff that the benefit would be supporting. And as you can see, that respondents sort of reported that access to benefits beyond paid leave is still pretty limited, and this is particularly true for family childcare educators. So in the green is just indicating when the percent of programs that so that they provide that benefit to directors or teachers is above 70%, and red is if it falls below 30%. Just a helpful tool to get you to see sort of the differences among the different program types. We also asked about, or able to sort of calculate educator openings. And so this is something that we also collect over time, so we can look at trends. And you can see that across the C3 programs, the percentage of open educator positions continues to decrease, and right now sits about 9%. I did want to flag that this is not meant to be comprehensive of every single role in the field. There are other roles that we collect information on, but made up sort of less than 4% of all the roles. So we're sort of excluded from the graph. But you can see that of the 3,700 open positions that we have right now, about 2,900 of them are teacher and assistant teacher positions, which is about 80% of all the open roles. So just to give you a sense of where that 9% is. And again, this is an improvement from the spring of 2023, when the vacancy rate was about 11%.
Ashley, can I ask a question? Is the 2,900 reported from the survey respondents from their own data on personnel? It's not like job posting data, things? Okay,
Correct.
got it, thanks.
Yeah, a lot of what we talk about here is self-report.
Yep.
This is looking at educator turnover over the state, and then also by role. Here you can also see that there's some good news, that the turnover rate across the state has come down from 32% in the fall of 2022 to 26% in our latest survey that was in August. The sort of not so good news is that it still remains pretty high. And just as a point of reference, not meant to be apples to apples here, but when you're looking at sort of turnover among K through 12 teachers, that's about 14% for the 2024 school year. So not a totally apples to apples comparison, but hopefully gives folks a sense of when we see when we say that it's still high, what the benchmark is there. So the statewide turnover rate is now sitting at 26%, and then you can see the graph to the right just breaks that down by role. So I think somewhat sort of complementing the previous slide where we talked about openings being very much among assistant teachers and teachers, you can see that assistant teacher turnover is at the top there. We also ask about tuition in the C3 survey, which is a really important topic for us to sort of understand what the sort of impact of C3 is on programs' tuition. And so at the top, we're breaking this down by the percent. This is the percent of programs who have increased tuition in the past 6 months, or that they reported that they plan to increase tuition in the next 6 months. And this is broken down by that Child Opportunity Index that Adrian had mentioned, which is that sort of composite metric, which categorizes communities into sort of this very low, moderate, high, or very high child opportunity areas. And so outside of sort of, CCFA, COI is just another metric that we use to really understand C3's impact on programs that may serve families in communities with fewer resources or fewer opportunities. So it's just another lens to look at that. And I think as you can, at the top here, see, as you move from sort of very, very low child opportunity areas to very high, the percent of programs reporting that they have or plan to increase tuition in the next 6 months increases. And you can see a similar pattern with FCCs, but I think in general, FCCs are reporting that they're raising tuition on a less frequent basis than centers. Which is sort of a nice segue to the bottom graph, which you can see in the blue is sort of all centers on the left, and then in the blue on the right is all FCCs. So more centers than FCCs are reporting that they've increased tuition in the past 6 months or plan to in the next 6 months. What's interesting here in the split is that CCFA participation doesn't seem to necessarily indicate differences in whether programs are increasing tuition or not with centers. But when you look to the right for FCCs, if the FCC enrolls a child with CCFA, they are less frequently reporting that they plan to increase tuition or have in the past 6 months compared to those who don't enroll children. So an interesting distinction there. Another thing that we ask programs about is the types of financial support that they provide to families beyond childcare financial assistance. So, as an agency, I think we recognize the importance of continuing to understand the variety of ways that programs try to support financial well-being of their families, and collecting information like this is sort of key to that. And so this graph breaks down the answers to that question. So what sort of other financial supports do you provide your families outside of CCFA? And the centers are in blue and family child cares are in red. And so you can see that for centers, the most frequently reported financial support offered is reduced tuition for educators and staff, which is wonderful. And that they also report holding seats for siblings or offering discounts, tuition discounts for siblings. And for family child care programs, they also commonly report holding seats for siblings or providing sibling discounts. And they also frequently offer tuition discounts based on the family's circumstance. So that wraps up the survey data. Happy to take a pause or questions now.
Yeah, let's
and
take
then
a pause now and
transition
open it up
back.
for questions, comments from the board.
Kim's having so much fun. This is your thing, data.
I have a lot of questions.
Okay,
I'll start. How do FCCs factor into the turnover rates, or do they not in the slides that you showed?
That's just center-based.
That's just center-based. Okay, so that's
Yeah.
just a helpful clarification.
Yeah.
Do you have an understanding of FCC turnover? I mean, like, would it be program opening, closing, or do you get down granularly to assistants?
We don't have data on FCC assistant turnover. We just look at the openings and closings of FCC.
Okay, it would be,
programs.
I think, helpful just to know opening, closing,
Mhm.
if that's available. And then what's the reason for inability to do assistance within FCCs? Is it not asking, or is it just a difficult
Yeah.
thing? That would be really interesting too. I think like what we know and from the past from FCCs is that assistants are hard to come by. And so I would be very curious in a similar vein to understand, like if we can understand that, to do that. So that's a first question. And then just a second question, in terms of like, and Ashley, you did a really good job of explaining the differences in spending with, is the money going toward workforce versus other, which could be a variety of other things. And I just wonder if you could elaborate on the FCCs and that majority spending on other. What are some of the top things? I think you mentioned housing and mortgage, but what are some of the other top things that come up under that spending category?
The single largest category for FCCs, as Ashley mentioned, is facilities, mortgage, and rent. And then we ask about some other investment categories. So we also include in there investments in curriculum, materials, those sorts of
debt.
those sorts of expenses as well. That make up the bulk of the non-workforce spending on the FCC side.
Thank you. And I would be very curious to think about how in the past year we've done capital funding for FCCs. How does that enter in and help take away from needing to spend on those things using the C3 fund? And could that go toward salaries, right? I think one of the things we know around FCCs is that more often than not, they are more excited about paying assistants than necessarily themselves. And so what I would love to see is FCC, like provider salaries go up.
I think the thing that's tricky with FCCs is many of them don't actually have a salary. So trying to disentangle like what the actual take home is for FCCs who often do their books in many different ways can be challenging. So we might connect with you with your thoughts on how to think about
100%.
asking those questions.
And I also think that this is a space for the interagency task force, right? To really think about like if it really is housing as a really big marker, this is beyond the scope of this department. And so like what does that look like for some interagency work to help alleviate whatever that looks like, either at the state, regional, local levels. Thank you.
Yeah, just to follow on that, I was looking at Gabby and her new role here as like, what type of data do we have around FCCs in particular as small businesses, and what other resources might be available, to your point, Dr. Lucas, like within state government, right? That might be able to help them think about the puzzle they're putting together a little bit differently based on what's available. So, FCCs in particular, I find it fascinating, like, because when you look at the growth, like there's a reason for that. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, from when I started on the board, like that is inverse to what would happen historically, right? Like we're seeing more FCCs where it used to be center-based, correct?
Yeah, there was a decline in
Yeah,
FCC
yeah.
nationwide
Yeah.
prior to the
So
pandemic.
interesting. My only comment is, when we started tracking this data, I think everyone wanted to see the salaries increase, and I think the predictability of this funding was a big factor in the willingness to do that, right? Because it becomes an annualized cost, and so number one, this ties back to our budget conversation of the predictability of knowing that these funds may be here, and so it'd be interesting over time to see. Yes, you can see that salaries are increasing and they need to increase more, but also that the whole benefit package, right, that you guys shared, does the predictability of the funding make people start to feel a little more comfortable about maybe thinking about the whole benefit package versus just the salary? Because there is an expense to that people want to feel comfortable with their ability to pay for, especially the absence of it in the FCC world, right? Of kind of this comprehensive plan that we all want as an employee at an organization. And so it'd just be interesting over time to see as if we can make this predictable and the formula settles and everyone feels accustomed to it, and we go through if we don't start to see maybe some of those extra benefits start to take hold as well, which would be hopeful.
Yeah, the other part we're thinking about too is I think there's a piece of that that's like part of it's affording the benefits, but part of it's also accessing the benefits. And like we're also thinking about how to support people in finding affordable sources for some of the benefits.
That's great. Yeah.
One thing I just sort of wanted to add, which I meant to say at the top and didn't mention it, is we've been doing these surveys I think relatively consistently since the beginning of the program, and plan to continue to do so, and also collect a whole host of data through the applications that programs provide. And just want to shout out to all the programs who spend their time putting all this data together and sharing information with us, and how much we appreciate it, and hopefully they can see how much we use it to inform what we're doing here and make positive change for the system. So just failed to say that at the beginning and wanted to mention a thank you.
Ready to move on to the next section?
So, any other questions, comments? Okay. All right.
So the other thing that we have changed recently in November is the formula. And we've also been paying close attention to how the money is flowing, and to sort of as a check to see is the formula functioning as we intended it to. Just as a brief reminder, we had some goals for the formula. We wanted to continue to recognize it as a critical funding mechanism, continue to maintain universal access to the funding formula, but also think about how we ensure that distributions are equitable and aligned to what we've learned from the cost models about the expenses of running different program types, serving different ages, running for different lengths of the day, as well as directing funds towards programs serving children with CCFA, and incentivizing participation in serving children with childcare financial assistance. And finally, making the funding predictable. So it's funding, you have your award set in November, and that funding amount remains the same through the rest of the year, which is something that had not been in place before. So that was new this year as well. You do have a slide that provides the details of the formula. I'm not going to walk through this. We can make reference to some of these pieces as we go through the data, but I think it's there for you for reference if you want to see how we constructed the formula.
Great. Thanks, Jocelyn. So I'll share a little bit about some of the early data that we've seen on the distribution of dollars under the new formula, and some metrics that we've started to track through the early implementation of the formula and plan to continue to track as the formula continues to roll out. So the slide here shows the average dollars per seat distributed under the new C3 formula, since the license capacity or seats is sort of the driver of the formula. We look at it on a per seat basis. As you can see in the chart, programs in Tier 1 are receiving more funds per seat than programs in Tiers 2 and 3. And also programs in very low opportunity areas, according to the Child Opportunity Index, are receiving more funds per seat. All of that we sort of expect because that's the way we design the formula to work. But what I think is especially notable is that programs in low opportunity areas receive the next highest grant amounts per seat, followed by moderate, high, and then very high opportunity areas. This is notable because the formula sort of directly and intentionally provides more funds per seat in very low opportunity areas, but not at the other opportunity levels. And this is I think a sign to us that the other elements of the formula, the CCFA, and other private scholarship elements of the formula are sort of helping the program to work as intended in reaching communities that have lower opportunity levels for children and families. And then the same is true for gateway cities. The formula doesn't sort of directly or intentionally or explicitly direct more funds towards gateway cities, but the formula as a whole is in fact working to direct more funds per seat to programs in these areas. And then we've also been looking at the funding per seat by several different provider characteristics. These are provider characteristics that are sort of built into the formula. So we can see that programs that fill a higher percentage of their license capacity with enrolled children, as well as programs that operate full-time, and then on the center-based side, those that serve infants and toddlers, and on the FCC side, those that employ full-time and part-time assistants are receiving more funds per slot than their counterparts. Again, this is sort of data from the early implementation, from the first few weeks of implementation of the new formula, but these are all data points that we plan to continue to track internally as the formula continues to roll out, and we'll continue to share.
I think one other point I just want to call out too is the per slot amount for FCCs and centers are different. And I think that does recognize the ways in which FCCs serve a mixed age range. And while it doesn't break down by ages the way it does in the center base, you can see that it does play out in terms of how programs are being paid per slot to come in closer to where infant and toddler rates are. It's center based. I think that is it. Any questions on our formula checks?
Questions, comments?
Do you want to share what we're planning to do next, and then see if they have questions on that?
Yeah. So this is the first sort of formal step in our process of reviewing the current formula and thinking about where we're going next year. We also have some updates to the cost models that are in process, so we'll have new information to look at, to think about, particularly thinking about some of the program characteristics that have been called out to us through listening sessions and other forms of field feedback that we've gotten over time. looking at the ways programs provide comprehensive services and serve children with special needs. I think there's some nuances in the out-of-school time space that we haven't fully accounted for that we want to learn a little bit more and understand. So we're in the process of gathering and reviewing all that information. To make any changes in the formula, we do now need to bring it to you. I mean, we always bring it to you, but there is now a formal process where it will have to come to you. You put it out to public comment. There will be a public comment period, and then it will obviously come back to you for your final approval. And we are also working on regulations for C3. C3 has been codified in the budget language, and this is a further step for formalizing C3. And so we are drafting those, and those would also go through a similar process once they've been drafted and coming to you, public comment, and then back to the board for vote. So these pieces are coming your way over the next few months, and I think we will be talking about C3 a fair amount.
I just want to mention two other areas that the team's been talking about, kind of watching. One is around behavioral health. The previous formula had kind of a staffing adjustment, which was a rough proxy, but we're thinking about how the formula going forward could really recognize behavioral health staff in a program. So you could think about it from the kids who are being served and their special needs or IEPs, or you can think about the staffing pattern in terms of making sure that there are behavioral health specialists or social workers working in programs. We know and we heard today the importance of that for supporting our classroom teachers and the educators in the program. So that is an area that we don't really have accounted for in the formula right now. That is probably something we want to think about going forward. The other thing we've been spending a lot of time thinking about is just the tiers themselves. And the data is very reassuring, and that it is being targeted and getting into the communities and into the programs, and even recognizing the way family child care kind of mix of age groups works, I think. So that's very promising. And then, but the tiers are sort of, we've been saying a little bit of a blunt, so our second tier, for example, recognizes programs that are serving anywhere from like one child receiving child care financial assistance to 24%. So is there something we want to look at kind of in that area in terms of recognizing? And of course, while we don't have child care financial assistance fully open in terms of voucher access, how are we thinking about access to child care financial assistance or tuition remediation and other things, and affordability in general as we think about the formula. So lots more to go, but I think, I just want to recognize like the team who's done so much work, not just to study what happened, but to actually make the formula changes in a really thoughtful way that was very engaged with the community and based on what we learned from folks about what was happening, responsive to legislative language, and feedback among those who are participating. And this program is still in its sort of tinkering its way to wherever it's going to eventually land. But I'm really proud of the work that the team has done and the outcomes that we're getting, which are very close to what we laid out to be the goals for the changes this time around. And so when we do bring changes back to you, they will be in the same vein of continuing to make progress along the areas that we've identified in terms of priorities for family affordability, investments in staff, and targeting resources to the programs, communities that are serving, our children who've been historically left out or had less opportunity.
And I think just one other thing I do want to say out loud. We are not considering a full overhaul of the formula like we did this past year. We're talking about tweaks to improve some of the issues that we brought up. But I just want to make sure everyone.
Continuous improvement.
No, I think it's really, it's a very important point because we made two very significant shifts in the last year. And I think, and the consistency and predictability are really important for programs to understand and we recognize to be able to plan their budgets and figure out how they're going to pay their staff and what they can offer as a package when they're thinking about recruiting staff in. So it has to be done in a sort of thoughtful and planful way. Not planning major changes again to disrupt.
Questions or comments?
I have one question. And this is around program demographics by COI in particular, focused on the FCCs. So I'll start with the centers. You see kind of a cascading as you move from low opportunity to high opportunity. That makes sense, and it's a pretty gentle slope down. There's a, I don't know if it's significant, but it looks large, jump between low opportunity and moderate opportunity, and then that continues down. Curious what you think that is, and I'm bearing in mind the other data that you just shared, which is that if FCCs are spending a good chunk of money on housing costs, particularly in moderate, high, very high opportunity spaces, and this is decreasing significantly, or what I think may be significantly, then that there introduces maybe a disparity there, but question mark on like what you think is actually happening.
Yeah, I think two initial thoughts. One is that the distribution of programs across COI levels looks very different for centers versus FCCs, and I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but on the FCC side, programs tend to be much more concentrated in very low and low opportunity areas.
Okay.
So I think some of what you're seeing there is just that the N size is decreasing pretty rapidly as you move down that column, and I think that's driving a big chunk of that drop there. But happy to do some more. It's a good question and worth doing some more digging.
There are also fewer steps, so to speak.
Yeah.
In the FCC formula, so they're just sort of more modal
I see.
Yeah.
amounts. But I will say, I think your point is well taken, because if you look at the range, there are differences across centers and FCCs that we should be paying attention to, particularly at the top of the range.
I think this just is further evidence for me to be like, let's poke at this housing thing, because I wonder if that alleviation, then it doesn't matter with this formula, right? Like, how does that interact with the formula? Maybe the formula is solid, and because the ends are different, and that's okay. I just don't want to think about, I do want to think about the equity around, like, what does that mean? How does that go in implementation, especially when there's differences in how we're using costs?
Cost models.
I could just watch these wheels turn.
I know, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Good stuff. Ashley, I just want to apply what you said and send gratitude and thanks to everyone in the field. I think, I know I've run into it, I know the commissioner runs into it, and others have, of when people can actually in the field see that we're using this data, that it's not just a questionnaire that's going into some but that it is actually guiding, not just tinkering, but continuous improvement, right? Like, how can we do it better? And I was talking to Ken earlier today about some of the old even technology systems, which will come up next on the agenda, but how just in the day, it was kind of, once it was done, it was done. It kind of lived in this absolute kind of hard-coded way, not only our technology, but some of these programs, and we are flipping that mindset to say, all right, how do we use all this information that we have to continue to make it better and ask these really interesting questions, especially when we're in a moment of the work of the task force and other people at the table to say, how can you share in this conversation with us to address what we know is kind of happening or what we're trying to create a hypothesis around. So really good stuff. And so thank you to everyone in the field for sharing their information with us to help have facilitate conversations like this. It's really good.
And thank you to you and your teams.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you all.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and we'll move to our last agenda item.
Perfect. So as the board is aware, we, one of our key priorities has been about building the capacity of the agency, whether it's in our staffing area or in our information technology policies and procedures. So we wanted to provide, we're at a very important milestone in some of our IT system modernization. So joining us up here is our Chief Product Officer, Jesse Murray, Chief Information Officer, I'm just going to use that title for now, Ken Clow, who works at the Executive Office of Education, and Kristen Berry, who is one of our product owners and has been working with us on our modernization efforts. So recognizing we are working under a product model, which is new for a lot of state agencies in general. So it is a great opportunity for us to work very closely in partnership with our colleagues at the Executive Office of Education. So many of our IT technology efforts are done both in collaboration with the executive office, as they own a lot of the technology and the contracts. So welcoming Ken, you may not have met many of our board members before, but he is a really important partner as we move through our IT modernization efforts. So turning it over to the three of you to share kind of some of the latest. We have reached some really important milestones in terms of building both a family portal, which will be family facing, and an educator portal, which will be educator facing and will allow us to have much greater data in terms of the educators who are working in the field. So happy to welcome you and turn it over to you now.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yes, really excited to have Ken here, who I often refer to as my partner in crime on the EOE side, and also Kristen as our family experience owner. I also want to just call out Daniel Wong, who's not here today, who's the educator experience owner, and will be doing similar work to Kristen on the educator portal. But before we dig into the specifics of each portal, I just wanted to set the stage of why are we doing this IT modernization effort? And before you just say everything is old, the way to address a problem is really to dig into what the details of that problem is. So one, we know that it's hard for users to navigate many of our systems, whether that's because they have to go to a lot of different systems, they need to go here for managing their wait list, they need to go here to figure out billing, et cetera. Or it's just within the application itself. We're not matching kind of modern patterns. You may think when you see a website, there are 3 lines in that upper corner. You kind of know now that means a menu. It doesn't say menu, but you've learned that through using, different software, different websites. And so there are patterns that exist that our programs aren't always following. We also know that, like the lovely folks who were just up here, it's hard for EEC to actually do all that amazing data analysis. They often have to join data from different systems, try to reconcile, is this the same person? Is this the same program? There are ways that we can make that so much easier internally. And we also know we want to do so much more. And the speed at which we implement more user scenarios for our families, for our educators, for our internal staff, for our programs, can sometimes be limited by the systems themselves. So what does a future look like? One, we want to make sure that the user experience meets people where they are. And so what I mean by that is that we don't assume everyone is techie. We don't assume that everyone speaks English. We don't assume everyone has a laptop or good connectivity. We think about, instead of having to learn a new set of skills to interact with EEC, EEC comes to where the user is and says, here's a user experience that makes sense. We also just want to reduce the silos in those workflows. So again, users shouldn't have to think about, did I go to the right place? But also that's going to help with the data issue. And then I apologize, I will try not to use too many techie terms. But when we talk about tech debt, I think it's often apparent, but the way I think about it is if you were building a deck on your house, you could take the time to stain it and weatherize it, and that deck's going to last you 15 years. Or you could not do that, but in 5 years, you're going to have a lot of rotted wood. And so if you wanted to change out the railings, paint them a new color, suddenly you have to deal with this rotted wood before you can do the thing you want. And so making sure that we're keeping up with those kind of maintenance tasks that aren't always as, sexy, but are really necessary for us to move as quickly and as proactively as we want to. And so part of how we do this, I'm going to turn it over to Ken first, is to talk about our specific development process.
Sure. So, and thank you, Commissioner, for inviting me to speak, and thank you, members of the board, as well. Like Jesse, I will really try to stay out of tech language land. Our IT teams work in 2-week increments. Well, first of all, the process we operate under is something called Agile, which is an industry term that's been around for a while. And our teams work in 2-week increments called sprints, where the idea is every 2 weeks to deliver something the goal is to deliver something that's of value to our customers. And our customers certainly are both EEC staff and their constituencies, whether it's families, providers, or educators. They work from a prioritized list of tasks, and I think it's important to point out that IT or EOE doesn't set what those priorities are. We look to Jessie and her team, who in turn work with their stakeholders internally, to tell us what's the most important thing you want worked on at this point in time. And using this methodology, delivering value every 2 weeks, we can make adjustments based on feedback. We can put prototypes in front of people. They can look at it. They can react to it. They can say, you know, I was really hoping that that menu was on the left side, not the right side. We can make those changes. And then another key part of Agile is, instead of waiting for a final product, which is something that's often called waterfall, where you try to predict everything that a customer could possibly want up front. We work in this iteratively, because that sort of ensures that what we're building is responsive to people's needs, and we don't wind up with something that people didn't want. And then finally, there's a lot of components to Agile that I won't get into today, but one of them is this idea of these self-directed IT teams that meet every day in something called a stand-up, and it's called that because you should be able to finish the meeting standing up, where they share feedback with each other, they share practices, they raise what we call blockers, you know, something keeping, you know, holding you back. Is it a question you may have? And through that, really, the team learns from and through each other and is able to deliver value for the agencies.
Yeah, and so when I came to EEC, I was thrilled that EOE was already doing Agile. That's a huge thing for a government agency. I think that the piece that we're adding on top here for these projects is really that human-centered design piece. And so an example of that, we have kind of an initial roadmap that we think we have an understanding of what we want to get to for that kind of initial release, where we think we want to iterate on. But we have these usability sessions along the way. We have these user research sessions along the way. So if we're working on the educator portal, for example, and we're talking to educators about how they would actually apply for their credential, if we find they're talking about, oh, well, I'm going to do it during nap time. I'm going to see how far I get, but I don't know if I'll have everything on me. That might be a reason to say we should prioritize a save for later button. That might not have been on our initial roadmap, because we might not have thought, you know, this is how they're going to actually interact with this, or this is where they're going to interact with this. And so by directly connecting with users and thinking about it not in the vacuum of this is a system, but how this plugs into their day-to-day, we're able to get to something that actually fits into their work, their lives, much easier, quicker, without a lot of misses. And so one of the last big thing I will say here is, even as we're doing those kind of micro iterations, we're trying to keep our eye on the big prize. So thinking about how this plugs into the EEC ecosystem and the Commonwealth as a whole. There's, you know, a lot of benefits that the Commonwealth distributes. We know that we're building two portals that, if you squint, have very similar interactions. So how can we make sure that we're doing that in an effective way? If you're going to put in your contact information here and your contact information here, can we make it so they just both pull from your profile? So trying to think about both the kind of the little bits of how is a person using it in this specific scenario, but also where do we want to go long term? And so, you know, in the context of the CCFA modernization, we've had a whole journey here, and we've been very, very lucky that, you know, we've been able to work alongside our program team. We've been very lucky that we've been able to get support from EOTS in things like our texting pilot, and now get capital funding for the program itself. And or for the portal itself. And so along the way, we've been trying to figure out, what are those incremental improvements that we can get those quick wins, but how do we actually move to centralized intake, get the families to the right place so they don't feel like they're dead-ended somewhere. And there are places within the kind of end-to-end where it really wasn't authentically digitized before. We had a PDF. PDF's no good on your phone if you don't have a phone or don't have a laptop. It's previous colleague used to say it's really held together by bubble gum and duct tape. And so how do we think about designing this like the right way? And so we really want to think about reducing the administrative burden. The best design is invisible. And so we want to get families to a place where this just feels like it's easy. I can do it in one sitting. And the way we do that is to actually work with families, work with CCRNRs, work with contracted providers, with voucher providers, to say, what are you seeing? Where do people get hung up now? Are there ways we can, phrase this differently? We can think about, save and resubmit, et cetera, different interactions, so that we can get it to a point where it feels natural to apply. And so both, as Ken was saying earlier, the way we're going to take both of these projects is we're going to have an initial version that has kind of the key scenarios that we need so that it gets out in the wild and people can start responding to it. Because if you wait until you think everything is perfect, you get to the point where someone says you screwed up half of it. Whereas if you start small and then build it, you get that feedback along the way. So Kristen is actually already engaged with our vendor partner on really drilling down into what we think this, we call it an MVP, min viable product, but this initial version will look like. And we think, the core scenarios, we have our waitlist program, Kinderwait, right now. We have an application that doesn't really have a program right now, and we have our eligibility system. And we anticipate replacing those with the family portal and case management system. And so we want families to be able to get on the wait list with a soft eligibility check. We want families to be able to apply online. It can be translated, it can be on a mobile device via the portal. And we want our family access administrators to be able to review and process those applications in one place. We have ideas that we think are very likely for subsequent versions, things like, we know that a scan of a document is probably not going to be always completely readable. So if a family access administrator says this is blurry, can they hit a button and say, can you just re-upload that one document? Might not be the thing that we need on day one, but something that would be good to have by day 30. We have things like, right now, I think for reauthorization, instead of refilling out the entire application, being able to see your information from last time and confirm, did this change? Did you move? Do you have a new kid or not? If it didn't, maybe you don't have to fill out those fields again. Just make it as lightweight as possible. And we also know that we are building towards, both in this portal and in underlying work in our payments and billing system, towards prospective payments for providers. But we also know there's a lot we don't know. And so the subsequent versions, the ideas that are on that list, the way they are prioritized, that is going to be shaped by this user feedback, by working with the program side, by working with the data team, by working with the IT team to say what is actually needed next and what is the right order to do it in. I just have one more slide and I'll open it to questions. We're going to do a similar thing for the educator portal. Again, if you squint at it, you just need someone to be able to log in. They need to be able to upload, fill in certain information and then upload certain information. And then a designated person needs to be able to review that and give an answer. there are details around which systems need to then, send information from there. But we're going to try to keep these pretty aligned from a technology perspective, from a user experience perspective. So again, our initial version, where we are just onboarding the vendor now, we're hoping that current and aspiring educators will be able to apply for credentials via the portal. We also hope that educators who have existing certifications, can convert those into credentials. And that we want one of the benefits of this for educators to be that they don't have to carry that around with them, that they know that there's a system that they can go to, that they can always get proof of their credential online. And so again, we have ideas of what would come in subsequent versions. We're looking at a new learning management system as well. I'm not going to go into that today, but integrating that directly into the educator portal. And you could see a lot of other benefits about if an educator is in there getting an alert of, hey, your background record check is about to expire. You might want to go work on that before it gets to a dire point, or actually link them to their program and lead so that we can have a sense, especially from the data side, of where people are in their career, and are they moving, or are they staying places? Are they advancing in one place, or are they taking new jobs? So again, we're really excited about this. We're really excited to engage with, the people doing the real work on the ground, and to try to make ourselves as invisible as possible in the process. But yeah, open to any questions.
Great job, Jesse. I just wanted to mention, too, that the board is aware that we are simultaneously working on moving away from our current certification system into a brand-new credentialing pathway system. And so the coming together of these two things will enable, we hope. So we will be updating the board probably in April on where we are on the credentialing work. And so as the educator portal comes and the credentialing work comes, the whole idea is to build the new portal around the new credentialing system and have it be a much more easy transition from existing certification, or at least that's kind of the idea. And then, go ahead.
Jesse, Ken, Kristen, thank you. Timeline, roughly, like where are you guys on the process of, go live, like backing into that?
Yeah, so we're still refining. I think there were some decisions that we needed to make around technology that have shifted things a little bit, but we're expecting, we're still expecting late summer-ish for educator portal, fall-ish for family portal, but we will let folks know if that shifts. So
the work so we have vendors on for both.
Correct.
We have product owners for both. And both projects have kind of kicked off and launched. So timelines associated with first the initial versions. Later. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to add in on the family portal side, just in terms of where we are right now. We are approaching the end of what we've named our phase 1, which is the onboarding phase. So there's been a lot of conversations with stakeholders across EEC, really rich conversations with everyone on the family access team, the data team, IT, et cetera, to just get the vendor familiarized with the child care financial assistance process, and also kind of think about what is family engagement and outreach going to look like in terms of, really having meaningful and effective conversations with families as we start to actually, design what the portal is going to look like, and start to get feedback from our stakeholders. So just a lot of learning, a lot of conversations with the vendors, and timeline refinement and things like that. So yeah, it's been a really productive month so far.
And Jesse mentioned this, but just to remind the board members too, that this is all being funded out of a capital improvement plan from the governor, who filed, at least 3 years of funding for us to support the family portal work. Can't remember if the educator portal is coming out of capital funds too.
The educator portal is coming out of preschool development grant funds right now.
Gotcha.
And if extra, iteration is needed, then some of that will switch over to operating after that point.
All right.
The family portal is a 2-year capitally funded project, but we do have the opportunity each fiscal year to apply for additional funds if
Where needed, or we could get to the subsequent versions that way. Yeah.
Yep.
I don't know if this is a fully formed question, but in the educator portal, stakeholder conversations, has there been conversation about the way that the family portal does or doesn't connect to other state systems? I know we love and hate that question all at the same time. But given there's so much Venn diagram overlap between families who are engaged with transitional assistance and children and families and Mass Health and SNAP, it's one of my favorite questions in state government. I was just curious where you're landing with that.
Yeah, so where that is always the question.
It is. It is the question.
And so where we've landed is that we are not trying to literally build our portal into the same software portal, but what we are trying to do is ensure compatibility. So one way that we're working on that, like very early on, is that we're going to use what's called MyMassGov as our profile and login, which families will be able to use in these other systems as well. We're also going to be looking at opportunities for other what's called API, basically how two applications talk to each other, connections, so that right now it's still a fairly manual process to get a referral from DTA. They still have to email, but in the future, can their system output and directly talk to our system and create a case for a family access administrator to then follow up on? I think that's kind of the immediate connection, but you could see other connections, like we know your general income level because you provided it. You might also be eligible for WIC.
Exactly.
And so we're definitely keeping that front of mind. It's not going to be available in the initial version, but we want to make sure that we're designing and planning to be able to achieve that in the future.
So Jen and I spent a lot of time together in this sort of integrated eligibility space, and it's something that has definitely come up in the conversations with the task force. And because I worked a lot on the SNAP side and the TANF or TFDC side, EEC was never really meaningfully able to participate in that conversation because we didn't have an eligibility system. So the strategy here is to build the ticket in to integrated eligibility. So the strategy in Massachusetts has always been to build on the legacy system. So Mass Health has its own eligibility system that will stay in place, that millions of dollars have been invested in. DTA, which runs SNAP and TFDC, or Economic Assistance and Welfare, has its own eligibility system that they've put millions of dollars into that will stay in place. We will then also have now an eligibility system that a family can enter information in. And when we start to pull those systems together, we'll have a way for them to talk to each other, whether it's a single document repository for permanent verifications or a single state ID through mass.gov. So we're basically building our ability to be part of that conversation meaningfully, which EEC hasn't really had before. In addition to how we interact with other agencies now, whether it's child care referrals or sharing of data, this will allow us to, or program integrity for that matter too. So without this kind of system, we really can't tap into some of the work that's been happening around state government to integrate. So we're going to get in the game.
And we've got the best analytics and research team in government, so hopefully this will be a nice cross partnership to figure out what to then do with all that information now that we are in the game. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And we also have talked directly to the integrated eligibility and enrollment team and sent them our existing application so they can start to do analysis on, how are different agencies thinking about income? Are they looking at it from a yearly basis or a monthly basis? Are they looking at it before tax, after tax, those sorts of things, so that they can try to keep those in mind as well from their end. So,
I have a quick question.
Please.
Or just overemphasize that, the importance of talking to external stakeholders. Obviously we learned from CCFA, and the issues that external stakeholders had with it. Just representing the field here, that it's super important to talk to obviously families, contracted providers, and the CCRNRs. They are the ones that are most impacted by this in a good way, if it ends up working like you intended to work. So necessity is it's the mother of invention. I have to write that down to remember it, because I think that there's a lot of strategies and ideas out there that I think we can also learn from, because they've dealt with CCFA and not working for them and in some ways, and they have figured out ways to go around it and make it effective for them. So I think, let's just stay close to the ground as much as possible. I mean, I would love to see that because there's a lot of good stuff happening as well, and I think we can learn and make sure that we don't throw that out with a whole new system.
Absolutely. Kristen, not to put you on the spot, but do you want to dig in a little bit to some of the outreach conversations you're having? I know you talked about it a little bit, but.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and user research, design research is kind of where is the world I come from. So that's going to be top of mind throughout the process. Just kind of leaning into what Jesse was saying earlier about iterative design, like as we go throughout the process, right from the beginning where we're trying to learn from external stakeholders, like think about what their motivations are, what are the goals they're trying to accomplish, what does it actually look like to be in the field, like in the moment, like you said, they're trying to fill out information during nap time, things like that. Like we're to try to learn all of that information just to gather their context all the way to once we're slowly building something out, kind of vetting it through them and saying, what do you think about this? How, if at all, would this be valuable to you? Things like that, and kind of putting these concepts in front of them. And then all the way to when we have a more fully fleshed out design and like prototype that they can click through, and we make sure that it's simple and intuitive to use. But we've been thinking very much about the individuals we speak to, and also making sure that we speak to a representative population of individuals. So with our CCR&R, making sure that we have representation from all of our different regions, and we talk to a variety of different contract providers. And with our families, we're not only speaking to people whose first language is English, and we're talking to folks from different regions and families who are working with DTA, DCF, perhaps who are homeless, things like that. So we're thinking very critically about how to make sure we're getting a diverse set of feedback as we go along in this process. And also, I think another lens that's going to be really important to think about this through is that childcare and paying for childcare is such a sensitive topic. So how do we gather this feedback and work with our external stakeholders in a really ethical way and make sure that we're kind of carrying like a trauma-informed lens through all of this, and making sure we're really having like meaningful conversations with folks and making sure that they feel safe during the conversations we're having with them as well.
Especially if they're existing client, they're currently receiving childcare financial assistance from us, right? Yeah.
And I love that you're saying that it should be invisible, because honestly, this is the work that happens that allows then childcare providers and contracted providers in the field and TCR&Rs to focus on family issues, like the real the real customer, or the real needs of the family, not really just navigating through a system it's really very time consuming right now. So I'm looking forward to just focusing on what we need to focus on. Thank you.
Absolutely. Any other questions?
Just to piggyback off of that question, I can imagine that there are families and early educators who may be excited to be user testers. Can you talk about the process for identifying who is in that pool? And I appreciated that it is a diverse pool across many factors. And so if folks were interested, is there an opportunity for folks to be in that pool, or what does that look like?
So we're going down a couple of different routes, and I think it will depend on what we're specifically trying to test or ask about. You could envision that if we're trying to dig into, the existing end-to-end experience, we might look at people who were just placed and send out a survey and ask, are you interested in engaging? One thing that we have built into our budget is that we can compensate families for user research because their time is meaningful and important, and we're grateful for it. We're also going to be working with several community organizations and our CFCE network, as well as, I believe, reaching out to some of our contract providers, some of the family councils that we we both are trying to get off the ground ourselves, as well as we know City of Boston has them. Obviously, don't want to skew it too far that way. I don't have like a sign up link right at this moment, but what we will end up doing is, having a screener survey where we can get an indication of, how many children do you have? Have you used CCFA before? So that depending on the particular research or usability testing we're doing, we can filter to, we're interested in folks who, speak English as a second language, or we're interested in kids in families who are looking for placements for siblings, those sorts of things. So happy to dig in more as we kind of firm it up a little bit, but that's kind of the general, trying to utilize the folks that are on the ground to get the word out, and then ensure that we have a broad representation for the studies largely.
And if you have any additional ideas for avenues that maybe we haven't thought of, all ears, so.
Awesome.
And Eugenia will be a big part of helping
Yes.
make sure we're
Eugenia
doing
has
that. So
already-
Eugenia's role around external engagement and being in touch with networks and being able to communicate. So this is not an IT project. This is a EEC project. So we'll be bringing the broad set of resources and kind of tools and forums that we have to be able to bring people in. So
yes,
great job.
And I'll
Yeah,
just
sorry.
say, this is great. I am glad we are in a place where we're having this conversation, and even the previous conversation too. Right? How cool is it that we can dig into data? I don't know. I know I'm in the but how cool is it that we can do that? How cool is it that we can talk about bringing what we do to families, to educators, and we're having these conversations now. I'm really thankful for the work that you all are doing. I'm thankful for the work that Jocelyn and Ashley and Adrian and their teams are doing, and the fact that we're even here, Commissioner. This is wonderful.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you all. Great job.
Thank you so much.
All right, I think that brings us to the end of the meeting. I just want to end with some thanks. I think we mentioned at the beginning of the meeting how important it is, I think, for this department and part of our DNA to make sure that we bring government on the road and into the field. And putting on this road show doesn't just happen. So want to extend thanks to Jackie and the extended team at EEC who helped make this happen. Even for those that are watching, there's always some stuff in the background going on to ensure that this, but it's really important, but to ensure that this goes perfectly and is transparent, and we are held accountable for what we're here to do. And you could feel the energy here in Framingham of why it's so important to do this, whether it be the tour or just the representation here in the crowd. So just want to say thank you to the team that helps to pull this off, and thank you to the team here at the Metro West YMCA for hosting us. It's been an awesome day. I feel like I need to work out more after spending time in this building. It's a beautiful, beautiful facility, so you guys should feel really proud of it. And with that, I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting. Can I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion adjourned. We will see you in Boston.
Thank you.